Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen.
Hey Docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference, not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable, compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions.
We all know running and growing an orthodontic practice isn't easy, and technology is supposed to help you, but oftentimes your practice management software doesn't. Some of them are even clunky and need lots of third-party add-ons. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to my startup and existing clients, because Greyfinch is different. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch. In this episode, we're exploring the power of activating core values within an orthodontic practice and how these core values can guide everything from goal setting to hiring and marketing decisions with our Director of Operations, Rachel. She will walk us through the practical steps of making core values a central part of daily operations and ensuring they drive success. If you're looking to strengthen your practice's foundation and align your team with your mission, the conversation is packed with valuable insights. Let's get started. Rachel, I am so excited to have you back on Hey Docs. Good to see you again.
Thanks for asking me. Good to see you too.
It's always fun when I get to have some of my team members on the show. I surround myself with very smart people, and you're one of my smart people on the team. Today's going to be fun. I've been looking forward to this episode because we're going to talk about some things that I know you and I are very passionate about. Before we jump into everything, I would love it if you would just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your role here at JA&A.
I'm Rachel Wilder. I'm a mom with 8 kids. We're a blended family. I've got kids from 24 all the way to 12. My favorite joke with my clients is if I can blend a family of 10, I can do anything. Anything that you need to have happen in your practice, I promise I can manage it. I'm an avid fitness girl. I love to be in the gym. I love to work out. I love to track my food and know what's coming in and out of me. I am the Director of Operations for Jill Allen and Associates, and I love what I do. My favorite role with Jill has been learning to be a consultant and learning to follow your lead. I think, as cheesy as that sounds, but definitely to follow your lead and to understand our industry and how to help people succeed and hit their goals. I came to the realization this year, what is it that I truly love to do? I think we hit our 40s and we start to question our life and where have I been and where am I going? One of the realizations I came to this year was I truly, at my core, love to help people hit their goals and succeed. And whether it's my doctors, my team members, or even being your employee and working for you, whatever I can do to help people hit those goals. And I feel like you were really great at seeing that in me and moving me to the place within our company so that I could do that for you. As Director of Operations, I'm able to train our consultant and be that in between for you on your side of the cut with what you're doing and then with the consultants. We talked about this last night where I manage the consulting side and I teach and I train, and hopefully I'm able to take that passion that you've taught me here and teach our consultants how to have that same passion and drive for what we do.
For a lot of doctors listening, that's what we all aspire to as we're starting our businesses. I've been doing this for 18 years now. And when I started off, it was just me, just like all the doctors out there who are starting a business, especially if they did a startup. It's usually you and one other person. It is incredibly rewarding to be at a position where you can add middle management and director level roles into your businesses. For anybody listening, you will be able to do that at some point. It really is great to take that weight off of you as new business owners. We start with that Superman or Superwoman syndrome where we have to do it all. Probably one of the hardest things to do is start to put your who's in place, key people that will be able to do what you do even better. Rach, you've done a great job at stepping in and doing that for me. Super excited to have you on today.
I love being your who, Jill. I'm good with that. I'll wear that medal all day long. Honestly, like touching on that, I think that so many times when we work with doctors, they're looking for that perfect person. Who I was when you first hired me, I'm not the same girl today as who I was then. My ideals and what I thought I wanted looks very different now than what it did when I first started. In my mind, I was always this entrepreneur and I wanted to own a business. I had all of these plans. And then as you settle in to who you are and you have meaning in what you do, that starts to shift and change and you're able to mold to what's around you. I think that's the key to finding that long-term employee too. It's like you find those people that maybe it looks like their ideals might be a little different, and we'll get to this obviously in our topic today, but their values start to align with your values. You start to see where this is going, how this can be long-term or big picture.
That's a perfect transition into what I want to talk about today. And that is really thinking about and activating core values within our businesses, within your practices. I want you to talk a little bit about that because we spend lots of time training on this. We spend lots of time talking to our doctors and our teams about this. What's fun about doing podcasts is we can really break it apart. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about active core values and how we help doctors come up with clarity on that and what that looks like within practice goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jill, this already, but I think over the years, I have learned to appreciate this whole core value concept. And I think it's that forever buzzword with entrepreneurs and owning your own practice or business in general. Everybody talks about core values. And I think most people have them, but I like the term active core values or even activating your core values because we can all have them, but if they're not a part of our DNA, if they're not a part of who we are and what we do day to day, they don't really mean anything. I think I'm going to start with a little bit of a story, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So when I first met you, you were in a practice and immediately I was intrigued and drawn to the energy that you put out. But at the time, I thought it was because you were a boss babe or a girl boss. As the years have gone on, I've realized it wasn't what it was. I do think what I was attracted to at that time and still why I love to work with you is because your core values truly emanated through you. Everything you did, you represented the core values. You owned your core values wholly. That wholesomeness, you're not perfect. You make mistakes, but I think the one thing that you've always done and tried to do was own who you were and what your values were. Every practice that you stepped into, I worked with you or saw that's what you did. And that was very intriguing to me. It made me follow. I think back now and I'm like, I wasn't part of the ortho industry at that time. I didn't understand conferences. I didn't even know who you were within the industry, but I just knew I was like, I like that. I want that and I want to understand it. And now we're going to fast forward a few years later. One of my really good friends and mentor, Amy Ledeen, who we've had on the show before, was doing this program called the Future Self Formula. She reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm trying this. I would love for you to be involved with it. Do you want to come along for the ride? And I was like, sure, why not? In there, we created core values for ourselves. That was life-changing in the sense that I was like, this is intentional. This is very intentional. I'm really trying to figure out what my path looks like, who I want to be through these core values. Then I came to work for you. I remember our very first team meeting. At this point, I really understood core values, and this is where it all came full circle for me. But it had been a long time goal to work with you. And I remember sitting at that very first team meeting, and you stood up and you were like, hey, we just want to welcome Rachel here. We're so glad that she's here. And I just was a little overwhelmed. And then you're like, but I want to start with my core values. And you started to list those core values, which I have right here. That's how important they are for me. You listed the core values. And what I noticed in that moment was that my core values that I had set for myself and what I wanted aligned perfectly with what you had for us as a team and at the core of who you were. It was like that aha moment. Yes, this is where I'm meant to be. Right place, right time. I actually heard a quote this morning. I was listening to Andrew Huberman, and he said, I wrote it down. Energy flows where attention goes. It hit me whenever I first saw you in the office. Your energy was flowing where your attention was, and your attention always in the back of your mind was on your core values. Without realizing it, that's what brought us together. So I think if we apply this in the scene of a practice or a business owner, energy flows where your attention goes. What we put out there is what comes back to us, no matter where we stand, no matter what place we're in. And I think you and I have talked about this so many times.
Thank you for saying that. Anybody who really knows me knows it's very hard for me to get through a team meeting without tears because I'm just an
Yes.
emotional person. It is what it is. But what I hope doctors hear out of that story is when you are building your businesses, each of you are thinking about what is my business going to be? It does feel so hokey sometimes, or say it's built on core values, but it really translates through everything. For me, when I was starting my business 18 years ago, I may not have completely refined and defined my core values because that takes time. You have to get in and be in business. But I knew what I wanted my doctors to feel. My first doctors were taking a chance on me. I can remember some of my very first ones. I was like, I'm new at this, but if you'll take a chance on me, I promise. There were these transcending core values that I wanted to make sure that I was holding to as I was doing my business, helping with doctors. And what I have found is that when you really can define that, and you're a perfect example of this, you're going to attract the right team members into your practice. And if they can see those core values and their core values align with yours, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. And as we're working with practices and we're helping doctors effectively define and then train on those. It's just some of those components there.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a conversation this week with a doctor. We have a core value worksheet that we share with our doctors. I had given her that core value worksheet, and I had gone back in to look over the worksheet and how we do it and what we do. And I think one of the things that happens when we're trying to figure out our core values is we're doing it backwards. A lot of people are like, this is what I want, so I need to select these things. When choosing core values, the best way to do it is you throw down words that are important to you, right? You throw down words. And I think sometimes we get so concerned about the outcome that we get too worried about how do I get to this piece? If we just slow down and empty our mind and put words that are important to you. When I created my core values, that's what I did. And then I grouped them together. I didn't think about what was the end goal. I really want to think about what is important to me as a person, to Rachel, like what is important to me, Smith, Dr. Smilemaker, whatever we want to say. What words really stand out to you? Some doctors just don't have core values, right? They just got in and did it. They don't know exactly what's important to them. But I've also created core values with team members, with the whole team, like in a team meeting before. And that's been some of my favorite team meetings. Without realizing it, we put out an energy, whether we realize it or not. And without realizing it, these doctors have put out these energies of things that are important to them. And so all of a sudden you'll sit down with this team and they're like, I think we're community based. And I think trust is really important to the doctor. And you've got other team members going, oh, yeah, this situation happened and this situation happened. I can see how that all ties in. People get fearful. That's important right now, but it might not be important in 5 years. When I came to work for you, I'm a different person today than when I first came to work for you because of the development and growth that's happened over the years. My focus has changed. What has become more important to me that wasn't back then. But I would be curious, Jill, when you first created your core values, was it halfway into your business, 7 years in, 10 years in? When did you decide to finally do that? And did it change anything for you in your business or your direction or your focus in any way?
Most business owners, when I started my business, I was focused on practice of doing business. How do I set up my QuickBooks account and how do I come up with my logo and figure out how I'm going to get my name out there? And I would say for me, it definitely was a progression. I probably had them really honed in by about 10 years in, where I really was like, this is what I stand for. These are the core values that I will always go back and lean on. This is where my team will pull their decisions from. When I look at it in those first 10 years, it definitely, there was just, I would say, core values of my person that I was going to hold true to no matter what. Actually, putting pen to paper and defining that took maturity as a business owner for me. And it was something that as my business grew and as I brought more team members on, I was able to relay that very clearly. I've always been a reader. I've always leaned on other industries and trains of thought for my education within our industry. But it wasn't something that I embraced as early as I wish I would have, but I always had that internal compass that I knew I was leaning on. I just hadn't put pen to paper with it. For any doctor out there thinking about this, and I know you would agree with me, and you touched on it, it has to start personal first. If you are lost with where your personal compass is going, not just morals, but your personal business compass and what you're looking for, it's very hard to then define that from a business and then from a leader, convey that to your team.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've never asked you that question before as to when your core values were really created. I assumed it was about year 10, to be
Mhm.
honest. The only reason I say that is because as I work with brand new doctors and doctors that have been around for a long time, I feel like it's like that refiner's fire year after year, right? It burns a little more and it gets a bit more refined through the years. About year 10 for most doctors is where they really have a clear vision of, okay, this is really who I am now. And I think you're right. It has to start with your person. Dina Stapper touched on this. We have to know who we are as a person. We're a better business owner when we do. When we're new startups, especially, and we're creating core values, not being afraid to put pen to paper and, okay, here's a basic outline of what it is, but knowing that will be refined over the years, that you will target in on exactly what's the why. It refines as we figure out our why. Our why sometimes starts just that first layer, and you can go down layers, right? And sometimes it's going down those layers and it's the years and the experience that kind of peels back those layers, but we have a basic idea of what we want and the direction that we want to.
And I know for me, from the very beginning when I opened up my business, our catalyzing statement has always been a practical approach to practice management. I knew getting into this, I wanted anybody that I interacted with to feel like I was going to give them a very practical way to do things, because I had been in some circumstances where there had been consultants that I had interacted with when I was working side of the business, and it just felt so cookie cutter. This doesn't even resonate with the practice that I'm in. It doesn't connect well. How does this make sense in this practice that I'm in? As a leader, as I was going through it, I may not have my core values dialed in yet, but I know what I want to do for doctors. It can sound very much, yeah, everybody says I want to give good care to my patients, but really understanding what that means and what your vision is, and then pulling on it is what you have to start with, in my opinion. I'm curious, Rachel, let's talk about those core values, especially working with doctors and you developing into a leadership role, and how important that plays into decisions you make and that we help our teams to make when they've got this array of values they're leaning on versus their own perspective on things.
I think this is actually my favorite topic within the core value topic. It's the way you've taught us to be as consultants, the way you've trained me to be a leader. I'm going to go back to a story. I remember one of the first doctors you handed to me, we had hit a really tough situation. And I had called you and I was like, hey, A and Z's going on. And don't know, do I have this conversation with the doctor? Do I not have it? I'm nervous. This is scary. And when you're a new consultant, that is scary. Some of those bigger conversations that happen. I remember being on Zoom with you and you just looked at me and you were like, Rachel, what's our core value on this? What is that? And I'm like, we're honest in our assessment. And you were like, okay, so if we're honest in our assessment, then what does this conversation look like with the doctor? And that for me, I know it sounds like such a small conversation, and it was maybe a 15, 20-second conversation. It completely changed the way I consulted, the way I worked with my teams, the way I worked with my doctors. It gave me confidence to stand in the space that you wanted me to stand in and to be the consultant that you wanted me to be. And in that moment, it was like that aha moment for me. As I did that, then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, more to these core values than just putting them on a piece of paper and looking at them. I have always had our core values in view after that situation. I realized that any situation I came across, if I could attach a core value to it, I would have a better idea of how to handle the situation.
Yeah.
I think we apply that to the team. How I train our consultants, one of the first things we do is that onboarding process where I spend a whole day with them going over who we are as a company, a practical approach to practice management. And we don't take a cookie cutter approach. Our core values, I have said those phrases over and over again when I'm training our team. As I'm training a brand new consultant, what does this mean to you? If you're looking at it from a consultant perspective, if Jill's your boss and I'm your boss and I'm telling you this, give me some examples where this would apply. It slowly starts to teach them to be an extension of you. This is my favorite part of what I do. I love when they have hard days or the consultants have something that comes up and I'm like, okay, what core value can you pull on here? For the first 2 weeks with some of our consultants,
Are you feeling the squeeze from declining starts and cash flow as costs continue to rise? Building on their industry-leading patient acquisition, insurance management, and collections solution, Orthofy is delivering groundbreaking innovations to keep your practice thriving. Orthofy's latest feature, IMAX, allows you to maximize every insurance claim submission, adding tens of thousands of dollars to your annual production. Plus, with the game-changing combo of FPT10 and third-party financing, Orthofy is making it even easier for patients to say yes to treatment while ensuring steady cash flow for your practice. Orthofy's commitment to your success in today's evolving orthodontic landscape is why I recommend them to my clients, and right now is the best time to get started. Visit startmoresmiles.com and use promo code HEYDOCS to get 50% off your implementation.
Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
Every day I was like, "Hey, tell me what core values you pulled on today. Tell me what situations you were in where you pulled on a core value that you knew how to respond or answer." As you work with a team in that way, this is what you did with me, right? As we do that, all of a sudden we have this cohesive unit and it's very fluid throughout. No matter who is answering an email from a doctor, our answers and the energy and what we're putting out there is very similar because we're all pulling on the same knowledge as far as those values and how to respond to them.
When we think about that, and docs listening, if you translate that into your practices, it's the same thing. You could be one doctor with one employee or with their director of operations and a large team. The teams and practices really out there killing it are the ones where the team members are pulling on those core values. Every situation, the way they answer a phone, handle an upset parent, answer an email or respond to a text, if we are basing it on core values, like you said, the offices, there's so much cohesiveness. And I think the hardest thing to do, and it all comes down to time, but as leaders, we have to have the time to do it. And I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about what you see. Our team is out there talking with doctors. Time is so elusive. It's the hardest thing a lot of times talking about. This feels so food.
I can give you an example of how utilizing them within the practice really can change the trajectory of the office. This summer, I had a doctor who was having issues with a team member. A team member was responding in ways that were not acceptable to the doctor. We had talked a lot about this. And after we got through this conversation, I was like, "Do you have core values?" And he was like, "Yeah, I've got core values." So you've got your core values. Are they important to you? Yes. Have you told your team your core values and taught them why they're important? I have them in my office. Homework. I want you to start talking about your core values in your morning huddle.
Mhm.
In morning huddle, let's do snaps, right? We're giving snaps to the team member who embodied a core value this week or who yesterday embodied one of your core values. So that was the first step. I wanted him to start with that because I wanted the team to realize how important those core values were. And then the next thing was, I want you to call this team member in that you've been having these issues with because he had called her in multiple times and felt like it wasn't getting anywhere. I want you to call her in and ask her, "Okay, we had this situation. You were rude to a team member in front of a patient. I understand you were frustrated. Can you tell me what core value you pulled on to help you come to the conclusion that you came to respond the way that you did?" And he was like, "Wait, can you say that again?" I repeated myself and he was like, "This is such a great idea." I'm like, "It is good because it takes everything back to those core values, right?" So when you have to bring somebody in to have a conversation with them about something that they didn't do, you're also taking that time to lead and teach them about the direction you want your practice to go and why. And they get to think about it. They get to be like, "Oh, shoot, I didn't pull on a core value in that situation.
Yeah.
How do I adjust that next time?" And then in that same conversation, if we were to pull on a core value, this is how that conversation could have gone. This is how it could have been handled. The only thing I can tell you is it works because I've implemented it enough times with our team, our JA&A team, with teams, practices, and doctors. It's not hooky in the moment because it's a teaching moment, right? I think we talk about it over and over again, but expectations, the core values gives your team expectations. And earlier you mentioned what helps with decision making. In our industry, decision fatigue is real and exhausting. Everybody from the doctor to your front desk team member, they are making decisions all day long. These core values give them places to put those decisions to help them
Yes.
make a faster decision.
Yep, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about the red car theory or RAS. You want to explain a little bit about what that is and how you think that affects a team's focus and awareness?
the reticular activation system. And there's a whole science behind it. And Jill, you may be even able to explain it a little better than I can. It's a part of the brain, but I'm going to focus more on the red car theory. It's basic and in simpler terms, but I would definitely say if you've not ever read about reticular activating system, you should, because it really is so cool. A lot of people talk about it in terms of goal setting, right? If you want a goal and you focus on it. But I think in the light of core values, it plays into this whole red car theory, which is you want a red car, you focus on a red car, and everywhere you go, all of a sudden you see a red car, right? And I'm sure you've had some experience with that in your own life with things that you're focused on. I know I have. Whenever I was going through my whole fitness and bodybuilding, it was like everybody I came in contact with had some kind of connection with a bodybuilder who had competed before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like everywhere I go, this is what it is. Everything in my day, everything I thought about was about that competition and what I was doing, from my food to the minute I woke up to the minute I went to sleep. If we take that idea in terms of our core values, we're talking about them in the morning at huddle. We're talking about them at team meeting. We're using them in the terms of, hey, you had this situation. What core value did you pull on? All of a sudden, everywhere our team looks and everything that they see is around these core values, and they're seeing them more and more show up for them. And there is science to it. This is real. And I think if everybody were to think about it within their own life, you could come up with an example of how this has shown up for you.
I love that. If we really can implement those core values, it really does help everybody pull on them. What a beauty it is when everybody's working together. But also, it becomes very clear when we have somebody that's core values don't match with ours. And I think one of the hardest things we can do in a business is tell somebody, hey, you're not a great fit. People have heard me say this multiple times, but don't ever take it personal. If somebody doesn't fit with your practice, if they don't align with your core values, that's okay. That's all right. Send them away with love, because you guys can part on good terms. They can go align with another company that fits better with their values. I promise you, there will be another person that you'll pick up and you'll look back and go, my gosh, this is so much better. Because when the whole team is working together, it's so much easier. That team member that's just rubbing against the grain doesn't allow us to work well. I think that leads me into my next question. I want you to talk about why we should be thinking about this when hiring team members, even sometimes doctors that are taking over practices, and being critical about, is my team aligning with core values if I've got them set in place or not? Let's talk about how we can really think about that within a hiring process. And
I had a doctor a few years ago who had laid out her core values very clearly. It was probably one of my first doctors that I had that I noticed that the core values were embodied in everything she did for her practice. She had me do some interviews to hire a new employee. One of the things with this doctor that was extremely important was community. Community was very important to her, and being integrated in the community and knowing the community. As I went through the interview process, it helped me weed out those people that weren't a good fit for her office. The person we finally ended up hiring, who was very integrated into the community. She understood how important it was to know people and to connect. Connection was very important for her. I felt it on the call. The minute we hopped on that call, I knew connection was important to her. And then also on the flip side of that, the doctor, when I got done with the interview and she went back and listened, she was like, Rachel, thank you so much for knowing who we are as a business. You pulled things out in this interview that I wouldn't have thought of, but I realize now you understand and know my business. When you go to hire, to understand your direction, let's give an example of technology. Let's say technology is one of your core values as a doctor. We go to interview and we've got somebody we're talking to who is kind and connects with people, but she doesn't know how to turn on a computer. She doesn't understand how to use Excel and Microsoft. That is not going to be a good fit for your practice.
Yes. Yep.
And in the long run, you're going to think she's so nice and you're going to love her, but you're always going to have this itch in the back of this is so frustrating. It's taking us 4 hours to get on a Zoom call or put a patient into the system. And that is not fluid. It's not a cohesive unit, right? We're not all focused on the same thing.
I feel what the core values do is it's almost like having a third entity in your practice. You've set it up, but you're able to now deflect onto those core values. Does it align with my core values? When I'm looking at this and I'm talking to this person and getting ready to make a decision on hiring, am I seeing some of that, or am I wanting to see the good, but
Yep.
knowing, like you said, I love that little itch, knowing maybe they'll learn technology, but yet it took them a half hour to get on the Zoom call, or they wanted to drop off their resume because they didn't want to send it electronically.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
And then I think too, when you've hired, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, do believe that it is our responsibility. And again, some docs you could be like, Jill, it took you 10 years to, really identify what your solid core values were. It didn't mean that I didn't have things in place. I hadn't really nailed them down. I was still growing. There were a lot of times as I brought people into my business, I didn't make great choices. I knew right away that somebody was not meshing well. What I would say is if docs can really lean into this, even in your 90-day probationary period, if this team member has been made very clear of those core values, and in those 90 days, they keep rubbing up against them, it's okay. They may not be the right fit. I know it's scary because we're always like, oh, it's so hard to hire people, but it's harder to keep the wrong person on your team and then have a cohesive team that all are following the same values, and then one person that's not.
I think a point to make would be the energy. Again, we'll go back to energy. The team that we have, they attract the patients that we get, right? And in the long run, what we see is that it starts to affect production. It starts to affect who's walking through our door. Years ago, I worked for a doctor. Now I can think back and see what it is. But he said to me, I always get the most difficult cases. They're always like a class 3 or they need jaw surgery. And he was so frustrated about it. I told him, that's what you focus on in terms of who we have for our team, who we hire determines where our focus goes and who we bring into our practice. When we have that one, I'm not going to say bad seed because sometimes it's not a bad seed. It's just somebody who doesn't fall in alignment with who we want to be as our practice. It shifts the focus of the whole practice because people affect people. It starts to influence the other people within the office. Sending them away with love, as you have always said, is better for the practice as a whole. And it's better for that person as a whole because they're constantly fighting against the grain when they don't fall in line with our values.
As we, start to wrap up, I know you and I could talk about this forever, but I'd love it if you'd give us maybe 3 pieces of advice. Team members, doctors that are working with us, you've been through this exercise with us. This is something that I want my docs doing right from the beginning when we're starting our practices because I want to help set those foundational pieces in place, knowing that you're going to evolve and grow. What are 3 pieces of advice you give doctors or team members who maybe have not done this or not taken this that seriously?
Yeah. So I think first place, there's 2 avenues here. We've got the doctors who haven't created any core values at all, and we have the ones who have them that have really never used them. But I would say the doctors that haven't created any at all, make a list of all the words that are important to you. Make a list and start to see the likes within your list. What are similar words that I'm using over and over here? Don't be afraid to know that this could change in 3 years. This could change in 5 years, but we have to start somewhere. So start making that list and really looking at what are the things that are important to you. For the doctors that existing that you already have them, I compare it to walk into your room and you're like, oh man, the paint's chipped. I need a new color in here. Remodel this space a little bit, repaint the room, look at it and love it. Redo those core values. Are they still important to you? Take it a step deeper. Why are they important to you? If you can figure out your why, they become shiny and new again and you know how to talk about them. Second thing is utilize them. Try to use them in the way we've talked about today, even if it's as simple as in your hiring process. I've got these 3 values that are important to me. What questions can I ask, or how can I find out if this person across from me reflects that? How can I see? Then I would say number 3 is what we've talked about today. Start utilizing them in your practice, in your daily life. With my core values that are personal to me, I read through them every single morning just to remind myself of my focus. These are important to me, and these are the reasons why.
One thing that you said, and I do think that it's very important that you have your own personal core values and then you build your business core values, because they can't be in conflict. You can't say, I want to do this in the business, and your personal core values are in conflict to that. You really have to think about that. And then I tell docs a lot, and I know we train on this a lot. And I think calling it out and taking it 3 deep. I want to be helpful to others. Why do I want to be helpful to others? I want to be helpful because I want to improve their life. Why do I want to help improve their life? If we take that 3 deep, that is a core value for me. That is something I hold true versus I read it on somebody else's wall and I thought that looked good. So that should be my core value because they're really smart. I think sometimes that's the easy out. It's, oh, that looks good. I'll just change that around a little bit and boom, I got my core value.
I would even take it a step further. And this is something I talked to a doctor about this week, but that third why, take it back to the core value. And is it in alignment? Is it actually the core value, or do we need to make a shift to it?
Yeah, for sure. If somebody wants to reach out, Rachel's a wealth of knowledge. I take Rachel to all the conferences with me. If you want to find out where we're going to be and talk to Rachel more about this in person, just find a conference that we're going to be at. I surround myself with smart people, and Rachel's one of those smart people for sure. She could definitely help you with this. If somebody wants to reach out, what are some of the best ways they can do that?
Yeah, let's just do that through email. Rachel@practiceresults.com. That's the best way to get a hold of us. That's where we live and die, is in our email.
And I would also say we've got some great core value white sheets that we are happy to provide. So if anybody's out there listening and are like, hey, I just need a jumping off starting point, reach out to us, jump on our website, shoot us an email. We're happy to get some information in front of you. Rach, this has been awesome. I appreciate you being vulnerable, talking about this. Sometimes I say this is the part of the business that isn't the sexy side, but it's the stuff we have to do. We have to do the work as business owners. And this is really some of those key components, those foundational pieces that we need to be building our businesses on if we want to be, want to have a thriving practice with thriving team members. So as I like to finish up with the little speed rounds, are you ready for the speed round challenge?
Let's do it.
What is your go-to productivity tool?
Man, I would say through and through, it is going to be the Google Calendar and block time scheduling. It's been ingrained in me, Jill.
I wonder who you learned that from. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Yes, early bird. Get me up at 4:30 in the morning, 5:00 in the morning, any day of the week versus having to stay up until past 9:00 at night.
I love it. What was the first job you ever had?
You know what? I was a lifeguard for a water park.
Fun. You were the one up there screaming at everybody with your whistle, right? Quite right.
Yes, pushing them down the slide. Turn around and go fast.
That's great. What would you say has had the most tremendous impact on your professional life?
Do you really want me to say this one, Jill?
Say it.
Honestly, you have been the catalyst for me to stand in my space and just own it on so many levels. And again, it sounds like I think you're perfect, and I know that you're not. But there are so many things that you have taught me over the years that have made me stop and think, whether it be to question myself, or I would say just having a solid mentor that your values align and they see your potential. That you can't beat it.
Thank you for saying that. I'll get all teary-eyed here. And to finish us up, what's one business skill you think everybody should have?
Resilience.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Being okay to fail forward.
Yes, that's so true. Fail forward.
Pivot.
Fail
forward. Pivot. That should be our catalyst statement.
Exactly. Rach, it's been awesome. Thanks so much for taking time out to do this. I know we'll be doing this again, but thanks for being on the team, and thanks for being on Hey Docs.
Thank you.
See ya.